Hello and welcome to another video of NCAA Imperialism. This is part 3 in a series where I take each of these teams here and they're going to play against each other. Whoever wins gets to take over their neighbor's land, and we'll do this until there's one team left. If you haven't seen part 1 or part 2, I would go back and watch those before continuing with this video, because there will be spoilers related to things you might see on the map here. So, with that in mind, we're going to get ourselves started. As you can see, some of the big expansions that we see here is teams like West Virginia. You will see Syracuse getting a lot bigger. Sam Houston State down in Texas. And certainly Wyoming getting fairly big as well. And now we'll see who else gets to take some land today. So once again, we're at our spinner here. Let's see what we get. And we have the UTEP Miners in Texas. And if they get kind of south or southwest, we're going to kind of respin it, but we shouldn't have to, as it goes to the northeast here. And as you can see, that means UTEP go up against Texas Tech. And unfortunately for UTEP here, Texas Tech was dominant throughout the whole game and never let anything up, winning by almost 20 points. And just like that, Texas Tech gets their first damage on the board, taking a good part of western Texas, and that's a pretty sizable piece of land now. But we continue on. So started off in Texas. Where do you think we're heading next? We're staying in Texas by visiting the TCU Horned Frogs and seeing what direction they're gonna go. They're gonna go straight north, which leads them to face up against North Texas. And in the end, it ended up being a no contest with the TCU Horned Frogs taking a big lead, and North Texas not able to catch them at all. So TCU is going to have a chance to expand. And just like that, TCU has gained its first land. If it does expand further, I will make the TCU logo a little bit bigger. So 2 battles in Texas already. Are we going to get another one in Texas, or are we moving somewhere else on the map? We're going out west to Oregon. And note, as always, if we end up going west, we'll just end up respinning. South and west, let's look at the map and see if that's going to work for us. So as we look at my map, it actually southwest would kind of point towards UC Davis, and that's what I'm going to count it as here, that the Oregon Ducks are going to go face UC Davis Aggies that are right here. And I am shocked by the result. I assumed that Oregon would take that matchup easily, but UC Davis took a lead and never gave up that lead. It got pretty close at one point by only being up by 2, but UC Davis held on and take the win. That is huge for them. And just like that, UC Davis, with the upset, takes a huge chunk of Oregon. And now when looking at the northwest corner here, I thought Oregon had a potential chance to go in here. Now you're looking at, well, maybe Boise State, probably Gonzaga as being a team that could take a lot of this land here. Or who knows, maybe UC Davis is going to go on a run. Wow, some great matchups so far. Let's see what we get next. Looks like we are going to Wichita for the Wichita State Shockers. And which direction are they going to try to expand to? Looks like directly south, which if I'm using their logo to go directly south, we're going to say they're going against Oklahoma State University, the Cowboys. And in nail-biting fashion, looks like Wichita State gets the upper hand on Oklahoma State. Look here. So Oklahoma State got an early lead, but then Wichita State brought it back, and it was back and forth the whole game, and it was just Wichita State that had just a little bit more at the end over Oklahoma State. And it'll be Wichita State getting their first chance to expand. And just like that, Wichita State extend their reach into the state of Oklahoma. But once again, we go back to it. We haven't gotten anyone from the East Coast yet this time, and let's see. And we do this time, we go to Rhode Island. Now, where Rhode Island is on the map, we're going to keep spinning to make sure it's a viable option, but it looks like mostly north in this example. And we're going to say mostly north in this case from the center of this area would be against the Providence Friars. And unfortunately for the Rams, they were not able to take on Providence to the extent of taking their land, as Providence really led most of the game anyway, but eventually won by a total of 9 points. And with that, the Friars now have only one opponent in their way from taking the whole state of Rhode Island. And here we go. Where to next? We did visit the East Coast. Are we staying there? No, we're going back out west to the Cowboys. Now, the Cowboys have been involved in a fair bit of tussle so far, but if we go to the northwest, that brings us up against the Montana Bobcats. And the Montana State Bobcats could not fend off the Cowboys, so once again the Cowboys, and with a pretty mighty lead too, was going to take a huge chunk of land, probably becoming one of the biggest pieces on the board. And with that, we see Wyoming pick up a huge chunk of land, and if we look at where Wyoming is, Wyoming probably has the most amount of land now on the board, stretching as far north as the Canadian border, as far as south as Colorado. And we spin again. We've got a lot of teams from the west. Are we going to stay there? It looks like we are going to the Midwest to see Cleveland State. Now, because that's on the coast of Lake Erie, can't really go north, but we can go to the west and see the Vikings end up taking on Bowling Green. And it is the Vikings that do take the win here. Close game, back and forth, back and forth. But as you can see here, Cleveland State taking a late lead, which they didn't lead for much of the game. Took a late lead to win the game by 5 points. And just like that, Cleveland State makes itself known in northern Iowa, or northern Ohio, and takes a pretty good piece of land. So back to the spinner to see who we get. The St. Joseph's Hawks. And so in the heart of Philadelphia, St. Joseph's is going to try to go south. And because it is south and a little bit to the east, we're going to say that in that scenario, St. Joseph's is going to take on Temple. And I don't know what's wrong with the logo for St. Joseph's, but they end up getting the win. A close game throughout and lead changes throughout, but St. Joseph's do get the win, a 2-pointer win. Incredible. And even though it's not much, St. Joseph's gets a little bit more space, expands into New Jersey, and stays on the board for now. So once again, back to the spinner. It's going to be a long road to get down to the last ones here, but next is the Columbia Lions. And they're going to end up expanding, trying to make a little bit more space in the New York area, going northeast, which means northeast is really going to put them up against Fairleigh Dickinson. And it is Columbia that comes up with the win here. Columbia looked to have taken the early lead, squander that lead, but then we're able to get that lead back and extend it fairly heavily to get a comfortable win over the Fairleigh Dickinson Knights. And even though it's a really small, cramped area, that's a pretty good chunk of land for Columbia to pick up. So we keep it going, see who we get next. And it looks like we're going to Denver. As Denver spins the arrow, as they're going to try to go, looks like south, maybe a little bit of southeast. And for Denver, that means they're going to be playing the Falcons of the Air Force. And looking at this, I think this is an upset. Look at this. Denver never trails in this game and beats them handily. The reason why I say this is an upset, so it gives us stats on this website of how many simulations these two games have. And note that out of the 7 simulations, 6 of them Air Force wins, with 3 of them winning by 20 points or more. This is the first simulation that Denver has actually won between these two teams. So way to go, Denver. You end up getting to pick up a huge piece of land. And I think that upset deserves us making the logo that much bigger, showing off this big piece of land that Denver University was able to win. And once again, back to the good old spinner. Where to next? To Alabama. And the Crimson Tide are going to try to expand in a south direction, a little bit of south-southeast-ish, which gives us a potential expansion into the South Alabama Jaguars, who have already taken some land earlier in a previous video, but we'll see who becomes the victor out of this one. And it was much closer than I anticipated, but Alabama did get the win. It was close back and forth, but Alabama was able to keep a 5-point lead in the end. And just like that, Alabama has a significant chunk of the state now after expanding down to the south. And let's keep going. Let's see who we get next. And we go and find Bellarmine. And Bellarmine end up moving to the east, which means they're going to take on the Kentucky Wildcats. That's a tough matchup. And it proved to be tough. Again, apologies for the image not showing up, but the Kentucky Wildcats took over the game and did not relent against Bellarmine Knights. And just like that, the Kentucky Wildcats take a bigger chunk of Kentucky here and put themselves in a good position to keep taking land if need be. So we go back to spinning, see who we get next. The Tennessee State Tigers. And what direction will Tennessee State try to attack in? They're going a little bit, well, southwest or south-southwest, which for the most part when we go south from the logo, south-southwest from the logo, it's going to hit Vanderbilt. So we're going to have Tennessee State face off against Vanderbilt. And it does look like Vanderbilt was able to take the win here, although there was a big part of this where Tennessee State was winning, but Vanderbilt brought it all the way back and was able to still win by a convincing 15 points. And I even decided to give Vanderbilt a little bit bigger of a logo now that they've taken some space and gotten a little bit outside the Nashville area here. Note that I had to cram Belmont in here to kind of fit it in here, but hopefully they'll get to expand as well. But back to the spinner, see who else we can get. Looks like the next one we are going to Green Bay and see what direction they're going to try to travel in. They can't go north because that's Canada, so we will spin it one more time. And they are going to the east. And that means Green Bay will be taking on Central Michigan for a kind of claim over whether either the Panhandle or a big chunk of land regardless. And just like that, Central Michigan pretty well dominate throughout and are able to then beat the Green Bay Phoenix. And now Central Michigan not only has all the panhandle, but they have a good chunk out of Wisconsin as well. Okay, and we are back at the map. Sorry, at the wheel. And we are then going back to the New York area, as the Highlanders are going to try to expand eastward, which means that they're going to try to attack Columbia, which we've already seen in this video. And through a very narrow win, Columbia pulls it out. This is probably the closest game that I've seen so far, back and forth, all the way to the very end, and with Columbia getting a 1-point victory at the very end. And now we can get a proper image, it isn't so pixelated, of the Columbia Lions logo in all the space that it's conquered this video. So once again at the spinner, see where we're going to go from here. Looks like Eastern Michigan. Looks like I spelt it wrong, but we're going to Eastern Michigan. And Eastern Michigan is going to expand going north. And I am fully aware of how poorly I put Eastern Michigan in here, but they're going to go up here against, I believe this is called Oakland. And it is Oakland that actually comes out with the victory. A 10-point lead, and it looks like by the play-by-play that Oakland got a lead kind of midway through the first half and never let it go, beating by a reasonable amount, 10 points. And just like that, Eastern Michigan is gone from the map, and there's going to be less and less teams in the state of Michigan now. And we continue on and see where we go next. And it looks like North Carolina as we go to the North Carolina State Wolfpack. And let's see what direction they want to conquer in. Northeast, which means northeast would give us to the East Carolina Pirates. And it is NC State that is able to come away with a definitive win, and they're going to expand pretty significantly out east. And just like that, NC State has taken a big chunk for themselves to now put a statement to the rest of North Carolina that they've got a pretty good chunk of the state. And we're back to the spinner here to see who else we're going to see. And we get the Kent State Golden Flashes. And they look to go into a southwest direction, which will put Kent State up against the Akron Zips. And it is Kent State that come out on top here. Back and forth game, but Kent State was able to hold on for the 4-point victory. And Kent State now has a pretty big piece of Ohio now as well. Look at that. So back to the wheel, maybe one or two more times. Let's see here. We go to Northwestern State. Not to be confused with Northwestern. Northwestern State is in Louisiana, and if they decide to go south, as they go south, they're going to face the McNeese State Cowboys. And it is McNeese State that comes out on top. They did give up the lead early, but then they were able to come back and have a pretty substantial lead to finish off Northwestern State. And now McNeese State owns a pretty big chunk of Louisiana. We'll see if they can continue that later. I think we'll fit in one more before this video ends. And we're going to go to the Lamar Cardinals. And they plan to try to travel in a north or northwest direction. And it's pretty entertaining that we're literally in the same spot. Lamar Cardinals is right here, and they're going to face Sam Houston State. But unfortunately for Lamar, it was not their day as Sam Houston State takes care of them pretty clearly here. And what we've done here is just expanded a little bit more of Sam Houston State now that they actually reach the coast. And just like that, we're at the end of the video, noting some of the big expansions, like big expansions for Wyoming, for Central Michigan, for UC Davis to beat Oregon over here, Denver making big expansions over here, and even in smaller areas as well. Columbia expanding so that I can actually see it from this far away, and Kent State, Cleveland State, McNeese State, and a fair bit of expansions in Texas as well, with I think 3 different places expanding their territory this video. So I just want to thank you for watching. Please leave a like, and if you like this content, please subscribe, because I want to continue to do more of this in the future. So thank you very much for coming, and we'll see you next time.